The dust swirled around the old wooden auction block as the farmer adjusted his worn-out hat, his eyes fixed on a scrawny, tired-looking horse. It was the kind of animal most buyers ignored, ribs showing, mane tangled, and a tired look in its eyes. But something about it caught the farmer's attention. Maybe it was the way it held its head, or the faint trace of fire still left in its steps. He wasn't sure why, but he knew he had to have it. The auctioneer's voice rang out, fast and sharp, calling for bids. No one seemed interested. The price dropped lower and lower until it was barely more than a handful of coins. The farmer hesitated. He didn't have much money, but he had a gut feeling, one that told him this horse was worth more than it looked. With a deep breath, he raised his hand. The gavel slammed down. Sold. As he led the horse away, whispers followed him. Some chuckled under their breath, shaking their heads at what they saw as a foolish purchase. A waste of money. But the farmer didn't care. He had spent years trusting his instincts, and they had rarely failed him. Maybe, just maybe, this horse was something special. That night, under the dim glow of the barn lantern, he examined his new purchase. Running his hands over its frame, he felt something beneath the dirt and neglect: muscle, strength, potential. This was no ordinary farm horse. It had the build of something greater. A racehorse, perhaps? He wasn't sure. But the more he studied it, the more convinced he became that he had stumbled upon something rare. The next morning, as he led the horse into the open field, a sleek black car rolled up to the farm. The farmer turned, puzzled. It wasn't every day that men in expensive suits visited a place like his. The door swung open, and a well-dressed man stepped out, his sharp eyes locking onto the horse. For a moment, the man said nothing. Then, in a voice steady and measured, he asked, "Where did you get that horse?" The farmer hesitated. Something in the man's tone sent a ripple of unease through him. "Bought it at auction," he replied, keeping his voice even. The businessman studied the horse, then let out a slow breath, as if he had just uncovered something priceless. He turned back to the farmer, eyes narrowing. "I'll make you an offer." The farmer barely had time to react before the number was spoken. A figure so large, so unthinkable, that for a moment he thought he had misheard. His hands tightened around the lead rope as his heart pounded in his chest. Was this some kind of trick? Or had he truly just bought his way into a life he had never even dared to dream of? The farmer's fingers tightened around the lead rope as the businessman's words settled in. The number was so high it didn't seem real. He'd spent his whole life scraping by, stretching every dollar, making do with what little he had. And now, in an instant, this stranger was offering him more money than he had ever dreamed of for a horse he had bought for nearly nothing. His first instinct was suspicion. Why would anyone pay so much? He studied the businessman's face, searching for any sign of a trick, but the man's expression was calm, almost too calm, like he was trying not to show his hand too soon. The farmer cleared his throat. "Why are you offering that much?" His voice was steady, but his pulse was racing. The businessman didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked around the horse slowly, his sharp eyes scanning every inch. The way he looked at it wasn't the way a man looked at a simple farm animal. There was recognition in his gaze, like he had seen this horse before. Finally, he spoke. "This isn't just any horse." He reached out, running a hand down the horse's side. "I've been looking for one like this for a long time." That didn't explain much. The farmer felt a knot of unease form in his gut. He had lived a simple life, one where things usually made sense. But this didn't make sense. He knew the horse was special, but how could this man see it so quickly? The businessman turned to face him. "I'll pay in cash," he said, as if that would settle everything. "Right now." Cash. Right now. The words sent a rush of thoughts through the farmer's mind. With that kind of money, he could change his life overnight. No more worrying about the next harvest. No more fixing broken fences with scrapwood. He could buy more land, better equipment, maybe even leave the hard work behind altogether. And yet, something held him back. The way the businessman spoke, the way he looked at the horse, it didn't sit right. This wasn't just a rich man wanting a fine animal. There was something more, something he wasn't saying. The farmer glanced at the horse. Just yesterday, it had been nothing but a bony, overlooked creature in an auction ring. Now, it was worth a fortune. But why? He took a step back, gripping the lead rope tighter. "I need time to think," he said. The businessman's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did. A flicker of something impatience? Annoyance? He reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek business card, and handed it over. "Don't think too long." With that, he turned and walked back to his car. The sleek black vehicle hummed to life, then rolled down the dusty road, kicking up a trail of dirt as it disappeared into the distance. The farmer stood there, staring at the card in his hand. His gut told him this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The card in the farmer's hand felt heavy, like it carried more than just a name and number. He stared at it, his mind racing. Was he making a mistake? Or was this his only chance to escape the life of toil and sweat that had defined him for so long? As he walked back to the barn, his eyes kept drifting to the horse, standing quietly in the paddock. There was something almost regal about it now, its coat shining in the sunlight, its posture more confident than it had been when he first brought it home. But was it just his imagination? Or was this horse truly something extraordinary? The farmer spent the next few days in a fog of uncertainty. He couldn't stop thinking about the businessman's offer. The money, the opportunity, it was everything he had ever dreamed of. But something about the man's eyes, the way he had watched the horse with such intensity, gnawed at him. It felt like there was more to the story, something he hadn't been told. He reached out to a few of his neighbors, hoping for advice, but none of them had much to say. They were just as baffled as he was. Some of them told him to take the offer. "A man like that doesn't come around every day," one of them said. Others warned him to be careful. There's always someone looking to make a quick profit off of something they don't deserve. The farmer couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He kept going back to the businessman's words, trying to make sense of them. "I've been looking for one like this for a long time." What did he mean by that? What was he really after? Then, just as he thought he might have made up his mind, another stranger arrived. This one didn't drive a sleek car. Instead, he pulled up in a rusty old pickup, the kind of vehicle the farmer was used to seeing in his neck of the woods. The man stepped out, wearing a faded jacket and a cap pulled low over his eyes. He didn't seem like the type to pay millions for a horse, but there was something about him that made the farmer pause. "Is it true?" the man asked without preamble, his voice rough. The farmer frowned. "Is what true?" "About the horse. That it's worth something. Something special." The farmer hesitated. He hadn't told anyone about the offer from the businessman. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "I've heard rumors. People saying that horse." He stopped himself, glancing over his shoulder as if to make sure no one was listening. "That horse has bloodlines. Not just any bloodlines. Some say it's worth more than anything in this town. More than anything in this country." The farmer felt a chill run down his spine. He had never heard such talk before. The idea that the horse might be something more than just an ordinary animal was beginning to feel real, but he still didn't understand why anyone would want it so badly. "I don't know what you've heard," the farmer said, keeping his voice steady, "but I've got no interest in rumors. I've got to figure this out myself." The man gave him a long look, then slowly nodded. "You're making a mistake if you don't take the right offer." With that, he turned and walked back to his truck, leaving the farmer standing there, his mind whirling. The tension in the air was palpable now. Every day, more strangers seemed to be coming out of the woodwork, all drawn to the same horse. The businessman had been clear in his offer, but now, with this new mystery on his hands, the farmer didn't know whom to trust. The possibility of a life-changing windfall was there, but so was the growing sense that he was on the edge of something far more dangerous than he had imagined. And the deeper he looked, the more questions he had. What made this horse so valuable? And why were people willing to pay millions for it? The answers were starting to feel like they were just out of reach, like something was being kept from him, something he wasn't meant to know. With each passing day, the farmer's decision grew harder. And yet, he knew that the moment of choice was coming closer. What would he do when it arrived? The days passed in a blur of uneasy decisions. The farmer couldn't escape the pull of the offer. It haunted him, gnawed at him from the inside. He spent hours staring at the horse, wondering what was hidden in its bloodlines, what made it so desirable. He began to question everything around him. Why had the businessman come to him, of all people? Why was he so insistent on buying the horse? Each night, the farmer would sit at his small kitchen table, the business card always within reach. He would turn it over in his hands, feeling the smooth edges, the weight of the offer pressing on him. But each time he tried to pick up the phone, his finger hovered over the dial, uncertainty flooding his mind. Then, just as he was about to give in, another visitor arrived. This time, it wasn't just a stranger with an offer, it was a group. 4 men, all sharp-dressed and serious, pulled up in a black SUV. They got out without a word, walking in perfect step toward the farm. The farmer's pulse quickened as they approached. They weren't here to chat or haggle. The way they moved told him they had a purpose. "You're the owner of the horse, aren't you?" one of them asked, his voice cold and direct. The farmer didn't answer right away. He'd learned by now to be cautious. "What do you want with it?" "We want the horse," the man said, his eyes narrowing. "It's not for sale, but we'll make you an offer." The farmer clenched his fists at his sides, tension rising in his chest. This was getting out of hand. The whole town seemed to be buzzing about this horse, but now these men, these strangers, were treating it like an object of unimaginable value. "I've already had an offer," the farmer said slowly, looking between the men. "I don't want to deal with this anymore." The man who had spoken stepped closer. "You don't get to decide when it ends. You're part of this now." The farmer's mind raced. Part of what? What had he gotten himself into? The sense of danger was unmistakable now, like the air before a storm. He was in way over his head. The idea that this horse could be worth millions now seemed irrelevant compared to the men standing in front of him. What if they didn't want to buy it? What if they were here for something else entirely? "We're not asking for your permission," the man continued, his voice low and menacing. "We're telling you. Get out of the way." The farmer stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to run, but his feet wouldn't move. What did they want from him? One of the men, silent up until now, took a step forward. "It's not just a horse," he said, his voice almost a whisper. The words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. "You don't understand what you have." And just like that, the tension snapped. The farmer's heart hammered in his chest as he glanced over at the horse, suddenly realizing that there was more to it than he had ever known. This was bigger than just a simple animal. But what was it? What were these men willing to do to get it? Before he could ask another question, the man who had spoken first turned sharply on his heel. "We'll be back. You'll make the right choice. If you don't, you'll regret it." And with that, they left as suddenly as they had arrived. The black SUV roared to life and disappeared down the dirt road, leaving the farmer standing in the same spot, his mind spinning with unanswered questions. The offer, the strangers, the ominous warning, they all circled around him now, closing in like a storm he couldn't outrun. The farmer was trapped, caught between greed, fear, and a growing sense that this horse was far more than he had ever bargained for. He stared at the horse one last time, his heart still pounding. The mystery was far from over. The real question wasn't whether or not he would sell the horse, it was what would happen if he didn't. And as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the field, the farmer realized that his life had already changed. But the path ahead was no longer clear. What had he gotten himself into? The days that followed were filled with a heavy sense of dread. The farmer couldn't shake the feeling that the men's warning was more than just a threat, it was a promise. But what could they do? He was just a farmer. The horse was just a horse. Or so he thought. He spent another restless night staring at the animal, feeling more and more like a pawn in a game he didn't understand. The horse's coat gleamed in the moonlight, its eyes bright and almost knowing. Something about its presence made his skin crawl, as if it were aware of everything going on around it, aware of him too. Then, as dawn broke and the first rays of light spilled over the land, the farmer made his decision. He would no longer wait for answers. He had to take control of his life. The fear, the uncertainty, it had been eating at him long enough. He called the businessman. His hand shook as he dialed the number, but when the line picked up, he was steady. "I've decided. I'll sell you the horse." There was silence on the other end of the line before the businessman's voice returned, cool and composed. "I knew you'd come to your senses." But as soon as the words left his mouth, something shifted inside the farmer. The warning from the strangers, the tension in the air, it all flooded back to him in that instant. Was this really the right choice? Before he could change his mind, the businessman added, "I'll come tomorrow to finalize everything." The next day, the businessman arrived as promised. He came alone, walking confidently toward the paddock where the horse stood. The farmer watched from the window, his heart racing in his chest. But just as the businessman reached out to touch the horse, the sound of a car engine interrupted the moment. The same black SUV from before rolled up the driveway, screeching to a halt. The four men stepped out, moving with urgency. The farmer felt a chill run through him as the men approached. "This is our horse," one of them said, his voice calm but unwavering. "And you're not selling it." The businessman straightened, his face hardening. "You think you can stop me?" A tense standoff ensued, the two sides glaring at each other. The farmer stood frozen, caught in the middle of a battle that wasn't his to fight. But as he watched the exchange unfold, something inside him snapped. He stepped forward, raising his voice. "Enough!" The men and the businessman turned to look at him, but he stood firm. "I don't know what's going on here, but this horse is mine. And I'm done being pulled in every direction." For a long moment, no one said a word. Then, the man who had spoken earlier, the one who had warned him, nodded slowly. "You're right," he said, his voice softer now. "It's yours. But you'll never be free of it." The businessman said nothing. He simply turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy with defeat. The four men, too, turned and disappeared without another word. The farmer stood there, feeling a strange sense of relief wash over him. It was over. The mystery, the danger, the decisions, it had all come to an end. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the field, the farmer looked at the horse one last time. He had made his choice, and he felt, for the first time in weeks, that it was the right one. The horse, it seemed, had given him more than he could have ever imagined, not just wealth or fame, but a sense of control over his own life. A simple auction purchase had changed everything, and now, as he stood there, he realized that the true value of the horse wasn't in its bloodlines, but in the lesson it had taught him. Sometimes, the greatest rewards come not from what we gain, but from what we're willing to walk away from. With a deep breath, the farmer smiled, finally at peace. The journey had been long, and at times dangerous, but it had led him here, to a life he could finally call his own. And with that, he turned away, ready for whatever the future held.